Welcome to the WP Builds podcast, bringing you the latest news from the WordPress community. Now, welcome your hosts, David Wormsley and Nathan Wrigley.
Hello there and welcome once again to the WP Builds podcast. You've reached episode number 273, which is entitled, How Do We Get Our Website Copy? It was published on Thursday, the 7th of March, 2022. My name is Nathan Wrigley and I'll be joined in a little while by my good friend David Wormsley so that we can have our podcast episode. But just before then, a little bit of housekeeping. If you like the things that we produce over at WP Builds, please share it. Go to any social channel you like. Our website is wpbuilds.com. Our Twitter channel is @WPBuilds. And just share the fact that you enjoy the episodes. I'd really appreciate that. It also helps if you give us some sort of 5-star rating, something like that, over on platforms like Apple Podcasts and so on. So anything that you do in that vein, I'd be most appreciative of. It does certainly help grow the audience, which in turn helps keep the podcast going. If you fancy keeping in touch with what we produce, go to wpbuilds.com/subscribe and you can sign up to a newsletter there, and there's things like our YouTube channel address and Twitter feed and so on. So wpbuilds.com/subscribe. Also, don't forget we've got a deals page. It's there 365 days of the year, searchable, filterable, and you can get a ton of cash off lots and lots of WordPress products. They could be blocks or themes or plugins, all of that kind of stuff. So that's wpbuilds.com/deals. Okay, let's get into the main event. I'm chatting this week with David Wormsley, episode number 273. It's entitled, How Do We Get Our Website Copy? Well, this is a pretty thorny issue, isn't it? And it's pretty likely that if you've been doing WordPress website building for any length of time, you've probably run into this problem where you just don't know what to put on the site. Should you write what goes on the site? Should you get an SEO or perhaps a copywriter? Should you put in dummy lorem just to fill the thing up? And of course, the design and the size of the font and the positioning of the words are crucial to the layout. And let's not forget, Google really want to know what your website is about. So it's a really important topic. And that's what we're talking about today on the podcast. I hope that you enjoy it.
Hello, welcome to another in the Business Bootcamp series where we relearn everything we know about building WordPress sites and running a web design business from start to finish. We're on season 2 where we're looking at the design process, and today we're going to be discussing how do we get our website copy.
Well done. You got through the introduction. I should add that very frequently when we do these, we have to begin many times. It's quite funny. That bit that you just said is hard to get through, isn't it?
It is. Do we need to recap anymore, or do we just say go and listen to the earlier episodes?
Let's just do a very quick recap. Okay. Shall I take this? So the intention here is that we are imagining that we're right back at the beginning of our web design, web business journey, and we're kind of trying to figure out how it is that we would get clients, work with clients, decide on pricing and all of that stuff. And so we're taking it topic by topic, and we're working on the assumption that we have got a client, a new client, whose name is Miss A. She is a lawyer, but other than that, we didn't really. We are obviously, as time goes on, we will get to know the client, what their needs are. But at the beginning, we didn't really have any knowledge of what they needed or all of that, but we know that they're a lawyer and that's about it. And then David's taking a different approach to me. I'm going for the more traditional, you may call it waterfall approach, where I do a presentation of a proposal, get a contract signed, get all of those docs in a row, and then basically set off, do the work, disappear for a few weeks, and then come back and say, there you go, have a look at that. But your approach is agile, and you can explain that, David, I guess.
Yeah, it's the kind of new agile approaches where you try not to set in advance. And I guess we're moving more towards that generally. I mean, the world has been in the idea that you might want to kind of build up, take baby steps with everything you do and learn from it. So it's a iterative approach, and it's a collaborative approach with clients. So it's really, from my point of view, it's actually a very real thing. I'm trying to rebuild my business to think how I might be able to distinguish myself from selling websites as a commodity, which I used to do, to this kind of new collaborative approach where it's based a lot more on data and evidence, and we build the long-term solution over time. So, yeah.
It's nice. And so today we're trying to talk about copy, website copy, and how we get it. So do you want to just highlight what the problem is that we're trying to solve here?
Yeah, so, well, we actually discussed this a little bit in the WP Builds Facebook group. I asked the kind of question about what people did with their copy and stuff, and people brought in copywriters. And well, we know with our lawyer's site, she has no previous content, so we need to decide how we're going to get the words for her site in an effective way. And we've got a few options, haven't we, which is kind of tell her to write it and we'll sort it out. We've got the give her some kind of structure, maybe a copywriter's template, and hand that over so she's got some structure based on what we think we're going to do with the site. And then we can work together, which is my kind of favored approach as best as I can around some templates and follow a copywriter's process to build up that. Send her to a copywriter first, which some people do, or bring in a copywriter who will work to our brief. So there's
a couple of others on there as well, but we're not going to mention those. Is that right? Yeah. Okay. Should we go through those one at a time and just sort of either rule them out in your workflow or rule them in? The first one then is to tell Miss A to go and write it herself, and then we'll sort it out once she's written it. That seems to me to be lunacy.
Yeah, I don't know what people do. Well, maybe when I started, I thought, just give me a copy. I bet it's never worked. I mean, if you did get it, you don't want it, and they've got no idea about how to do that. So it doesn't work, does it?
Well, I think in this particular case, it doesn't work for a couple of reasons. Number one, because, like you said, it will probably be really not what you want. They might hand you something gleefully, and you'll probably look at it and think, okay, that's different. Because bear in mind, this is a lawyer. They're probably very good at writing a particular style of writing, but probably not the style of writing that we're going to need in order to sell their products or services. And the other reason is because they're a lawyer and their time, I suspect, is going to be consumed elsewhere. And I would imagine, and this is very specifically in the case of a lawyer, I would imagine that the intention here really is to sort of hand it over to you, and you find somebody for me. I could be wrong. Maybe they want to be more hands-on, and obviously your agile approach would encourage that. But it feels like you might be better off buying in the time of somebody who's slightly better. So, okay.
I mean, the only thing I could say about that, it's not quite tell them to write it, but we could be asking them to send us stuff that's already been written. Maybe they've published some articles, or they've got, I don't know, just even their business card or something that might give you some idea about words they've used already. But that's it. I think that one goes out, I think, totally. I think it's too much to try and sort out, and they've no idea how to structure copy in a way that's readable for the web.
Yeah.
So the next one.
Well, I was just going to say, but obviously in certain cases it might be that that's the exact right approach. Like, I don't know, let's say somebody comes to you and they want to advertise themselves as a poet. Then it might be, okay, great, go for it, go for your life. Perfect, you're the exact candidate. But in this case, I think no. Okay, the second one was give the client a structure, like some sort of copy template, and see what they can do with that. So in other words, it's a little bit like the first one, but you've given them some guidance. And by template, I guess you mean a copy template. That is to say, here's how the words could be constructed. This is how other people do it. This is how copywriters might go about it, as opposed to a page template. We're not giving them a design and saying fit things into these little boxes. It's more, here's the kind of words you should be approaching when you're designing your homepage and whatever.
I mean, following on from the last chat we had when we were talking about the structure of the pages, in some ways we might follow that anyway. We might be subconsciously, I think in my case, I've read a lot of books on copywriters, and they seem to follow the same format of a page, a homepage, having the value proposition at the top, which tells people what's in it for them here, moving on to the problems they solve, moving on to the benefits, moving on to the the kind of social proof stuff. So there might be, and I think a lot of the copywriters templates are like that, but what's handy about them is sometimes they will give you an idea, a format, how you might be able to write a value proposition. We do this because of this, blah, blah. You fill in the gaps,
And to be honest with you, I would imagine that those kind of tropes, we do this because of this and so on and so forth, they're not necessarily the kind of thing that they would instinctively do. So it's more helpful, isn't it? There's definitely some merit. Yeah. I'm still thinking it's not the best way of doing it, but it's a better way. If time and budget are limited, it feels like this is certainly better than just saying, right, go on, get on with it, bring it back when it's finished. This is an improvement. Okay, so that was number 2. Number 3 was work together with her around templates and follow a copywriter's process. Right, I'm going to put my thoughts onto this one quickly first. In this particular case, as I said earlier, I think this one's dead in the water just because of the fact that it's a lawyer. And I would imagine that the lawyer's time is going to be more valuable. I think I would struggle to have that conversation. Can you please let's have a conversation for a couple of hours. We'll nail the copy. Well, in that time, they probably could have earned 5 times more than I'll be earning, if you know what I mean. So I think that's going to be a real struggle, but only for Miss A. Probably not for the vast majority of the work that I've done in the past.
Yeah, I mean, there could be 2 ways of looking at that. We've assumed we've got this solo client, but she might have staff that she's employing, and she might, if we wanted to go a true agile approach, my take on agile is as a small, as a freelancer or small agency working with my wife. But if they did, I mean, you would form a little team, and she would, if you like, allocate them to make these decisions with me. So you could work in an agile system as they do in big organizations. They work in a team. It may not be the head boss who's making a lot of money. What's done is then sent to them before you go on the next iteration of work. So it could be possible that she might have somebody that she could dedicate, who didn't cost as much by the hour. But also, in my own mind for rebuilding my business, is that I like this approach, I'm trying to do it. But what's actually happening is reality is I'm making a Google document with all this stuff, and I'm writing a few ideas and stuff on there, and then I say, go and have a look at it. And if they see something and they add something, then that's great. If they don't, then I just have to say, okay, we'll put a deadline. Otherwise, I'm going to assume you're happy with what I've put in there, to move it on.
Yeah, I quite like that approach, the sort of time constraint approach, because you really could be waiting a long time if you said, here's some copy, here's a Google Doc, go and have a look at it. It may be weeks before they get a chance to look at that again, and so the whole thing is stalled. But if you say, I don't know, 48 hours, if I'll just work on the assumption that if you've got nothing to say within 48 hours, I'll press on and put this text in. And of course, the nature of your new design of your business is that can all be corrected later on anyway, because the whole thing is going to be iterative and what have you. So working together around templates and follow a copywriter's process seems like an interesting one.
Yeah. Or we can, as I think some people do, send her to a copywriter first.
This is quite interesting, isn't it? Because in my scenario is much more like a closed box. They come to me and I describe what I'm going to do, and then I close the box and go off and make the website, and then finally reveal everything. There you go, that's what it is. And this kind of steps out of the boundaries of that. I've kind of let go of a bit of the project that perhaps I don't want to let go of, because all of a sudden I'm into having to work with some other person that I might not know. Of course, if it's a copywriter that I've got on my books and we've worked together before, that could be a completely different relationship. But if they've got their own copywriter, and their own copywriter is going to insist that certain things are done in certain ways, and I disagree, that could be a point of conflict. But in terms of getting the text, at least you'd get something, but it's whether or not they would see themselves as a sort of proxy designer and come back and say, well, this has got to go here, and this has got to go here, and it's got to be in this sort of size and font, and already I'm thinking, oh, really? Do we have to have this conversation? So I think there's good and bad to this. Certainly it's going to get the copywriting done. Hooray! But it might be that there's a conflict in design and what have you later on.
Yeah, I mean, I spoke to someone, it was for one of my videos, and they walked me through the building of their site, and they had a copywriter in from the very beginning. The client had them first before they asked them to do the design. And the copywriter, which a lot of, professional copywriters will do, they've done the really part of the branding. They've defined, what is the character of this business and who their user is, and they've gone further and structured the pages. They've put on where things are going to be, where that content is going to be on the pages. So by the time all the kind of work that should have been done, all the UX work that you would do, the deep understanding about what this business is trying to convey, is all done by the copywriter. And then the only job you've got as a designer, if it comes to you after that point, is to really illustrate the words, which maybe is what we should be doing. But it sounds wonderful, but the only problem is I want to do that stuff.
Yeah, yeah. It's quite nice, actually. I'm warming to this idea suddenly. The idea that somebody else is responsible for the way that the site is, and all I've done really is paint by numbers. I've just been told, fill in this blank with an image, make that bit over there red, and so on. Yeah, it's interesting, but a possible point of conflict. Okay, so that's getting a copywriter to do it. There's definitely benefits there. And then the next one, bring in a copywriter to work to our brief. Am I right in saying this in an ideal world, this is how you want to do it? You want to be working iteratively with a copywriter, with the client on the call at the same time?
That would be lovely, wouldn't it? If there's a budget for that. I mean, my two favorites are working together around some templates, and if there's the budget for it, then getting somebody who's really good with words and all working together, that would be fantastic round a brief. But I still like, because rebuilding, thinking afresh again on how we might come into this business. You and I both pretty much just built websites because that's where we grew up. That nobody, the brochure site was the thing, wasn't it? Just owning your space. And now I think as everyone can build a website so easily, the only way to distinguish ourselves as businesses is perhaps to say we're more data led, that we are more looking at the UX, what brings business, what brings traffic, what brings conversions. So I'm keen to be, that's my job. So that's why I want the copywriter to come in, because I want to do that early work where we're defining what the keywords are going to be. Because again, copywriters, as you pointed out in the notes here, where does the copywriter end and the SEO expert begin? They're both dealing with words.
Yeah.
I want to do that stuff. So so I would probably set out my page layout and then just say, can you make these words better? And they would listen to the client as well. So that would be an ideal for me as well.
My thoughts are that's probably the most likely scenario that any of us are going to face, is that the client is going to have some thoughts on what they want, but they're going to want steering, because they're going to stare at the blank page and not be sure how to write the kind of copy that would be more successful on a website. And there's going to be that kind of collaborative approach. So I think the one that strikes me as the easiest in my scenario is to do the giving them some sort of copyright template if they wish to do it, if they're willing to do it, and see what comes out of that. And obviously just directly hiring a copywriter to take the burden of that. So there's all sorts of different ways to do that. So that's our problem anyway.
Yeah, and I think that's the hard bit about how do you go about doing design. The first episode we did where we said, what does a design process look like? And I was very keen on this idea that I've got these kind of layers. So it starts with this, big question, how it's the kind of business stuff, the market research, how we're going to get our traffic and conversions, what's going to sell, in there. And that would lead on to a certain degree doing what a copywriter does. Some of them do anyway, at least in terms of structuring the layout of the information on the pages. We might favor pages on certain things because they're going to do well in SEO, or they're not being covered by our competitors. So we've got a little gap in the market that we can use. So I want to start that process from that. But it does strike me, if you were in this business, starting a new business, what an ideal to team up with a copywriter who does all of that early stuff for you. And you just come in and do the website, you know?
Yeah. How easy do you think is it to convince somebody in the year 2022 that a copywriter is something that is actually required? And what I mean by that is most people can read and write. Yeah. Obviously, everybody has some sort of spectrum there. You know, some people are excellent at it and other people are not so good. But most people can do it. And probably, I would imagine, they would imagine that writing for a website is just a fairly trivial thing to do, and there's not a lot of thought. You just need to get some keywords in there, get it out, get Google discovering it, and we're off to the races. Everybody's going to be landing on the website. So little discussion about whether or not it's going to be an easy thing to sell. I think, because I never really did try and sell copywriting as a thing, I think it is quite a hard thing, because most people can achieve the words on the page, but getting them to realize that, well, actually, if we could have a different set of words on the page, you might double, triple, whatever, your visits or engagement or whatever the metric might be. But I think that conversation is going to be hard, especially for a new lawyer, Miss A, who maybe is watching the purse strings very carefully.
Yeah, I think so. And I think clients could be misled by the same idea that they might think about web designers. I mean, we're all going to be different on this, and some people are going to be very artistic, and that's what they're brought in for. That's not you and I, is it? And what we would argue, our role in the world, is the fact that, well, actually, we provide information in a way that the good user experience isn't really being delighted by all the flurries and stuff like that. It's actually things working as expected, and often the simplest sites, when they're thought out and laid out correctly, work as expected. And no, it doesn't need a lot of beauty. It just needs to not cause friction for the person who's going there trying to achieve a goal. So I think it's with copy as well with that. They might think we're hiring somebody to be a copywriter in order to give them wonderful flowery language which we couldn't come up with, but probably they see their job as, how are they going to create that great user experience, so where they get the words they need to be able to complete their task, and they may be very simple words. So I think it's that problem, isn't it? If you say a copywriter, I think everybody's got some idea of a writer.
Yes, that all makes perfect sense. So we spent the first 20 minutes basically outlining the problem. What's the next section we've got is what our role is. Should we delve into that a bit?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm just
You're finding it.
Start me off.
Oh, well, okay. So we've got things here like, what does the design process look like? We tackled that in a previous episode. So how exactly are we going to sell this? What is the position that we're putting ourselves in? Are we basically saying, look, we're the expert. You absolutely have to have a copywriter. Nobody in the year 2022 would dream of building a website unless there was a copywriter involved? Or are we just suggesting these range of things? Would you go to the client and suggest, let's say, 3 of the different things that we outlined as the problem earlier and give them the option to pick one? Or are you just going to go in and say, look, this is the way we're doing it, you're going to get a copywriter, that's part of the deal, off we go?
Well, I've become a fan. Last time I said that I think now this early looking at the traffic would lead to some conclusions a little bit. And that actually might dictate whether a copywriter was in. One bit we've put in our notes, we'll go completely out of order on this, is that let's say we've looked at our competitors for Miss A, and they all, they've got lots of blah, blah that we expect to see, and it looks in a certain way. They've all got royal blue and they've all got gold on their sites, serif fonts, and lots of, stuff that's legal and sounds very professional. But we might just say there might be a gap in the market here for, just as you mentioned in the previous episode with your experience ordering a Indian takeaway online. They cut through all of that and went straight with the call to action button. You want food, click this button, pick your food, it'll come.
Right.
And get rid of that. And that could be the same. And I think we might decide that early on in that early process about how we might go for against the traffic that we might get and against the what we might be able to how we might be able to compete with others. So I mean, we might find that Miss A doesn't really need a copywriter, because we might just say, okay, let's have a go at this idea. You know, you'll do a free initial consultation, big button for that. You can do it through Zoom call, phone, email, here it is. And the rest is just blah, blah, aimed at getting keywords in for your SEO. And the copywriter, I think, goes out the window for the moment. They might want to look over it and see if if your call to action button, the micro copy and things like that has got some words that they wouldn't use that might work against you or things like that. But otherwise, their role has got really reduced in that, I think.
I think the most likely outcome for me is that my role would look like this, that I would go to the client, have the meeting, and I would raise it as a possibility. It would be something like, look, obviously it's words and pictures. Maybe there's a few videos, but basically it's words and pictures. And so the words make a big difference. They're going to have a huge impact. Here's some options. I can do it, and you can basically, I'll just fill it up with something that is probably, well, scraped is the wrong word, but I'll go and look at competitors and I'll match that style. I will put it on the website, but obviously it's a CMS. You can go in and change that at any time. Or I might say, or if you want to, take it to the next level and really do a fabulous job and give yourself the best possible chance, we'll hire in a copywriter. And I think at that point I would be taking all that on. I don't think the best outcome for me would be that the copywriter speaks at any great length with Miss A. I think I would like to be the conduit there in between. And so I would ask all the questions of Miss A. Look, what are we trying to achieve? What does the website need to do? What are we trying to get people to do as soon as they arrive, and so on? What are the outcomes that you want to achieve? And then I'd go to the copywriter and say, look, it's a lawyer. This is our area of geographical interest. We need to do this, this, and this. This is what the client wants to happen. Please, will you supply me with that? And here's what the website looks like right now. Go. And that would then, I would feel more comfortable being the intermediary, and maybe the copywriter literally never even speaks to the client. I just think that's instinctively how I would have approached it.
Yeah, and I think I'd be interested to hear what copywriters say. I did watch a video from another channel where they were talking to a copywriter, and they were saying their own experience of working with clients, web designers and stuff like that. And they kind of accommodate what they get, but it's going to vary very much. So some clients who've worked with them for a long time come with exactly what they're taking responsibility. Say, we've got these pages, it's going to look like this, we've got these sections in here, and we kind of want you to fill in these and what it needs to do, where others will be a bit more like open and I've got blank pages here for about, can you come up with the whole copy? In which case then they're going to have to assume the role of laying out your page for you. And I think, that it's all about responsibilities. So I'm quite keen to kind of remarket my new stuff as this kind of more data-driven web design thing, where I take the responsibility for this ongoing relationship. So they're going to have to slot it. I'm going to have done that thinking before the copywriter can come in.
Yeah, I guess there's a part of me which has a concern that if there's an external expert for everything. So we need to get the SEO done by an SEO person. The branding needs to be done by a designer, and so do the logos and what have you. At some point, I'm going to be faced with what are you doing? What exactly are you doing here? I seem to be paying all this money out to these different people, and what are you just the person that puts the jigsaw together? And so there is a bit of that, and so that leads to the conversation. What would be even the remit? What are we looking for in a copywriter? Are we looking for somebody who is a psychologist who can sort of like pull the heartstrings and get you to convert? Are we looking for, would we want to roll into that an SEO? Is copywriting SEO? Are they the same thing? I don't really know.
Yeah, I think, to be honest, they're just like us. They can cover a multitude of these kind of different skills within that wider user experience. Well, some will and some won't, and I guess this is one of the difficulties. You're going to have to find out what their background is and what they expect to do. But I've consumed quite a lot of content by copywriters years back, lots of old books and stuff that I've read. But, it does strike me, they've influenced what I do. But when you go and look, if you just do a Google search on processes for copywriters, you'll see that they've almost become the designer. They're designing all the pages for you. So you're right, and I think we have to find the person we can work with to make up for our lack of skills. There might be certain areas where I don't think you can, I would have the time to write on it or would want to, or, do you know what I mean? There might be something that I wouldn't be passionate with, but otherwise I'd have a stab with the client in the first place. And then if the budget's there, I would say, let's have a copywriter look at it from their perspective.
Yeah. I think it's totally clear that if you've got the budget, or rather, let's rephrase that, in an ideal world, every single website will be scrutinized heavily by a team of copywriters. So it's just really imagine that we've got the $1 million website and you can employ a team of copywriters to go through it. Because one of the things that I've noticed when I have been given the job of writing the copy, even if that was just a placeholder kind of copy, is that the staring at a blank page is really, really challenging to get over. And I know that sounds like hyperbole, but I mean it. It's very hard to come up with the right language. And I made a sort of slightly stupid comment that I could have written Lord of the Rings. It is within me to have written a 1,000-page book. I could do it. Would anybody read it? No. Nobody would want to read that drivel. It would be awful. And so what I'm trying to say there is that I am clearly not as good with language as other, especially the written language, as other people are. And so getting this in front of other people who really know what they're doing would matter. But I feel that in the case of the lawyer, you're going to be fairly constrained in what that means. I'd imagine it'll be, well, I could be wrong. We'll maybe discuss that in a bit, but I'm imagining that the requirements are going to be fairly straight-laced. There's not going to be much in the way of funky vernacular. We're not trying to get the new kids to sort of go with your lawyer's service. It's going to be a professional thing, lots of archaic language, really emphasizing the history of your business or your capacity to carry things out in a professional and timely and cost-effective way. And in many ways, it's kind of probably the most uninteresting copywriting that you could actually wish to write.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know how you go about a lawyer's site now. I mean, if you put the user experience first, I mean, if there's the money again for that, to be able to, anything would be better than nothing. Just ask people what they're, somebody who could potentially be a customer for our lawyer, what they're looking for from a lawyer's site might give you some indication, or what puts them off. But again, in terms of the UX scale of things, you're right at the top end in the very sort of what they're conscious of. And when you ask people their opinions, they give you something which is not necessarily how they will behave.
Yep.
It's trying to get to the motivations of your users always with all sites. And I just wonder with a lawyer site, because one hand, you could be right with all of that. It needs to, what they're looking for is this kind of very established, authoritarian, looks like they mean business to protect you kind of site.
Right.
Or their priority might be their goals, which is the easiest way to not feel intimidated to get somebody who's got those skills. And that leads you into an example you put down on the notes there, somebody you know about who went the completely opposite way with the lawyer's site.
Yeah, this is nothing to do with me in that I didn't have any interactions. It's just a friend who happens to be a lawyer. And they came up with this new kind of way of buying. I won't go into it, but essentially they had something new, a new way to interact between clients and lawyers. And so their first iteration of the website, and again, I didn't have anything to do with it, was really funky. It looked how to describe it. They had a really kind of really unusual logo. The spelling of the law firm's name is really unusual. I won't give it away, but it's got like multiple letters that don't belong. Like they've misspelt the word deliberately. And it worked. It really worked because they're now an incredibly successful company. Seems like they've reined that in a little bit. Just went to their website just recently, and it looks much more formulaic now. Maybe now that they've got their funky clients and their funky clients have got successful businesses and they no longer wish to be cutting edge. They just want to get a professional legal person in. But they did it, and it worked. So, maybe that discussion needs to be had. What's the tenor of this, Miss A? Are you trying to attract a different crowd? Are you trying to emphasize that you're different? Or are you just trying to do what everybody else does and hope that you'll be found in that needle, in that haystack?
And I think that's where all that kind of early research comes into it. I mean, you obviously might not get a time to get into it, and you might not be able to really do any kind of testing, proper research on real users. But at least, like everything with this, I think with the whole idea of iterative approach, agile approach, is the idea is that you don't know. You set out a hypothesis which you will go to test. But the thing is to try and get this process going forward, just say, look, we've got two routes here. All of your competitors in your town are stiffer like this. This is a bit of a gamble. Let's say our users are going to... They're not really worried about your credentials or stuff. They're just worried about being able to find somebody who's skilled and they want the easiest way and the most approachable way for them. Shall we go that route? And if we are, let's be consistent with everything we do in the design and the copy with that, you know. And I think that's the thing, isn't it? Getting that early established, that we're always... That's my fear with the copywriter, is that if they didn't do... Somebody's got to do that early deciding which route you're going to go, which hypothesis you're going to test. Are you just going to be this type of business, or you're going to be another one, and everybody needs to be signed up? Else otherwise you get this friction, don't you, with everybody pulling and terrible compromises.
Yeah, I think also the quirky thing about this particular client is that they will know what good writing looks like. Yeah. So it might be a case of, I'll know it when I see it. So, you might go through 5 or 6 different variations. Okay, how does this look? They're going to have that ability to read something and say, yeah, that cuts through. That's what I want to say. So in a way, this Miss A is our worst possible client. But I do like your idea of split testing. In fact, you wrote that in the show notes, and it kind of feels to me as if, especially the stuff on the homepage, the split testing of that could be really crucial. If you just change out a couple of words and see how that goes, that could be really, really useful, especially as a way of saying, actually, look, we were both wrong. This variant worked and we assumed it would be the opposite, but let's try going in this direction now.
I mean, it's really interesting because I have this going back years now. I think the books I've read were now 11 years old, the Joanna Wiebe copy hacker books. Mm-hmm. And I kind of followed her a little bit, not recently, but she was, big with Unbounce, who do all this A/B split testing on landing pages and stuff. She was in with that crowd. And very much her role as a copywriter is testing copy, what works and what doesn't work for individual sites. And they really go quite extreme on their testing. They say that works the best. It's not just changing a few words here and there. And I think you could do that on a lawyer's site if there's a commitment to that idea. So you could shove, like I was saying, we can go with that, stick it right at the top, how you can contact them straight away there, and another version with that buried down on the bottom of the page and all the blah-de-blah. And it'd be really interesting to see what's happening. And then that might, if you got that out and you got enough data in, that might actually change the design of your site generally,
Should we explore like how you would even get a copywriter? I mean, in my case, I am going to be cold calling. I don't have any contact with anybody. So it literally is going to be a case of, I'm going to phone up a few people and have a chat with them and see what their rates are and see how I get on with them and examples of what they've done and so on. But that would be my approach. Or I might go online and look for some kind of website which aggregates these kind of people.
Yeah, it's interesting because, they come in different forms, don't they? I was looking at one site there where it's, like you see a lot of these design sites now where you can, I don't know, get them for a month they assigned a designer. They've got similar kind of things going on for copy, I've seen, where there's a certain price per word, and I just think, well, to be honest, I would be put off by that word, unless it was for articles, because if I want sales copy, it really is going to be their process that I'm going to be interested in. The fact that they understand, it's not going to be, less words might be better. I don't think I would be inclined to do that. So if I was looking for a copywriter, I guess I'd be looking for somebody who shares the same approach to building a website.
Yeah, I think I would be asking those same sort of questions as well. Is it okay? Well, essentially, you would want to figure out how to get them the information that they need and how to get that information back off them back onto the website. And so, it might be interesting to get into the conversation of, have you used WordPress before? If so, how do you feel about interacting in the page builder and saving things over there and you doing that? And if they're not comfortable with that, okay, we're going to use Google Docs to share this. What's your time frames? How quickly do you turn things around? And so, I would want that one-to-one relationship. I'm always into the, can I call you on the phone or get on a Zoom call or whatever, as opposed to buying something from like a Fiverr style website. Where you're just sort of buying a small amount of somebody's attention for a little bit of time. I think I'd rather that I could know their first name and who they are and all of that kind of stuff.
Interestingly, I think I would be more attracted to the copywriter who's a bit like me. So I've got no natural design skills at all. But what I realize is that most of the time, if I learn the rules, the kind of rough color theory rules, the idea of setting out spacing in a consistent way, aligning things correctly on a page, I'm going to reduce the friction for a person looking at the site, and it's going to look to them more beautiful. It's going to behave as expected, which is the main job. But I'm never going to, design beautiful, outstanding logos or, some of the, incredibly talented designers out there to just blow you away. But they may not actually help their clients particularly.
We had a conversation before we pressed record, and we ended up talking a little bit about one of my clients who kind of took this on board really wholesale. This is going back years. I no longer work with them, but everything that we've talked about so far feels like it's been about the homepage, more or less. What does that landing page look like? How do you convert people at that first hit? They took the approach that they were going to really invest in a blog, and they found their own copywriter. Coincidentally, they were a law firm, so there's some sort of coincidence there, but they had a very big staff, and so they could afford to dip their pocket. And essentially, they decided that they were going to have a copywriter who literally has no experience with law, but each week they would give them a subject and say, go off, research, write us a piece. And after the first 4 or 5 were published, they said, this is all working out fine. Now you have access to the website. You can just go and publish them. We don't even need to check anymore. We'll trust that you're doing the same standard of work that you've done so far. It was really effective. The copywriter clearly knew how to work with Google, so there was a bit of SEO without a doubt in there. The company knew which bits of the business they wanted to grow, so they were just giving her, okay, we want a piece about this, I don't know, divorce law. Give us 3 pieces about divorce law, or whatever it may have been. And it was really successful. I could absolutely see the optic on the analytics. That all stopped prior to me losing them as a client. That all stopped, and somebody got moved internally, and that was the end of that. But it worked. And so it's not just about the homepage and the copy on the homepage and all of that. Sometimes I think it's about the long game, the blog.
Yeah, and I think there must be some people who are better at some things than others. Article writing must take is a kind of different skill, isn't it, to coming up with good sales copy. There's a kind of formula, isn't there? I mean, I see something which I borrowed from copywriters I use quite a lot. They use a lot of subheadings so they can convey more in short spaces of time, something you wouldn't be doing with natural writing. One of the interesting things about I think about the whole copywriting is how much consistency you need to have. So if you get a copywriter in and they do your sales page or something for that, and then somebody else is going to do the blog, somebody else is doing the terms and the legal stuff on your pages, is whatever you bring your copy, if you decide that this needs to be consistent throughout your whole site for your branding, when you bring in a copywriter, you really need to be left, don't you, with some rules to work to, so someone else can take on that role.
So
does that make sense?
Yeah. Are you describing the situation that I just sort of did, where you need to give them a real brief of, okay, it's got to be 1,200 words, it's got to have these many subheadings, and all? Is that what you're talking about?
Yeah, sort of, but just the terminology, I think I mentioned before, you might, whether you cut certain words down, we are to were or whatever, whether you do that consistently throughout all of your site, or whether there's a sort of personality in your tone. So you do use, it's not going to be probably unlikely to be the case in our lawyer, but we're using kind of funky terminology. That needs to be sort of built into the tone of everything. Or maybe it doesn't. Maybe the blog just stands separately.
Yeah, I think I understand more now. So yeah, I guess in the same way that we would have discussions about design, and okay, we want it really toned down. Like you said, it might be classic blue collar with a gold logo or whatever for a lawyer, typically. Or it might be, we're selling a brand new pair of trainers. Let's make it really funky and have lots of movement on there and bright colors, and it's really looks completely wild. I guess the same is true for the written language. The copyright would need to know, okay, this is the tone. And in our case, the lawyer thing, I guess it's going to be fairly somber, fairly professional. But depending on the client, you might want to say, no, you go to town. We want it to be really jazzy. We want it to have all the latest language that the kids are using and so on, because they're our target market. Yeah, you really would have to have that conversation, I think.
Yeah. I just think the copywriter and copy comes into part of the branding thing. I remember watching something years back on Ben and Jerry's. They've got a very distinctive ice cream.
They do, yeah, really distinctive brand, isn't it?
Yeah, and they've got a certain language. But what someone was, they were looking at the site and saying, you go down certain avenues, I think for buying stuff or the legal stuff on various different pages, where it completely goes into a different language. And they were just saying how they did get it so right, but also get it so wrong in places because they just don't follow through the brand consistency.
Right.
And
okay.
They've maybe altered that since. But
Yeah. That was always one of the questions that I asked, just in terms of the design, right at the beginning. That was always one of the things on the form. What kind? I can't remember what my categories are, but I had like 5 or 6 different options for what's the feel of the website. Do you want it to be professional, classic, or do you want it to be funky, brand new? All of that. And I think, those would be really important things to do. Hey, just one, we're sort of getting fairly close to the time. I don't know if we've covered off everything. One thing that we've totally missed out, I think we missed it out deliberately. What about AI?
I knew you were going to say that.
I know.
Yeah, we'll just write it all with AI.
Done. It's an interesting point, because this increasingly feels like something which people are just handing over to AI robots. And you can imagine, page builders come along and all of a sudden everybody's thinking, oh, we're out of work. You can do it all with a page builder. Any non-technical person can now build a website. You must be having that same conversation within the copywriting groups. Oh, no, the copywriting AI is coming out and it's going to take our work away. And I don't know, would you ever trust AI?
No, but it's interesting. I have got one of the tools. I don't know if it's one of the best ones, called Writer. And interestingly enough, I just made a couple of sort of temporary blog posts for this job that I'm doing using it. Now, it was really just to have another blog post which could be linked to in the page that was talking about a particular thing that this person does, the therapy, and it speeded things up. No one's going to read that flipping thing, but it was good to get the sort of keywords in there. But it did give me. I mean, it didn't work that well. You couldn't really, long form content wasn't going to work. But if you wanted a quick summary of what these people did, that wouldn't violate any kind of copying rules, because you can test them with the kind of copy scrape, is it called, that tool?
I don't know.
There are lots of tools that test whether it's unique copy. It was quite good for that. But the headlines, when I've tried it, for blog post writing, I can't imagine them being very good sales. And I don't think copywriters will be threatened by it any more than, well, we are threatened, but I don't anything more than we are as web designers. The fact that now someone can kind of click a button and get a full site,
right,
with something like Cadence or Astra.
Yeah.
And, so I think it's the same thing. It's what we sell to the client, isn't it? It's what we bring. I'm big on this idea that, we just say anybody can get this stuff now, but this is what we do,
So a Chicken Little comment is not appropriate. If you're a copywriter, the sky is most definitely not falling in just at the moment. In fact,
I think so.
I think we've made a good case for always employing a copywriter. I think this conversation has strayed around the boundaries, hasn't it? A bit, and kind of usually it'll be a matter of budget. In an ideal world, if there's money, get a copywriter. If you can't afford it, you might have to think of some other way.
Yeah, I agree completely. If there's the room for one, I think that's it. But I think, with us being, I guess most people listening to this are in similar situations to us with having to do it mostly as a freelancer. You probably just need to have a system in place when you haven't got one.
Yeah.
And a system in place should you get the budget for it.
That's good point. You don't suddenly want to be on the back foot. You never use a copywriter and then somebody suddenly says, could we have a copywriter? Yeah. Maybe, don't know. Yeah, probably a good idea to get in touch with one before you need them and strike up the relationship. Have we covered what we wrote in the extensive show notes?
I think we have.
I think we have. Maybe there's a few bits that we missed out, but on the whole, I think we managed to cover it. So there we go. That was how do we get our website copy. Where are we going next?
We're going to branding next, which probably should have come first, but as there's overlap. But we'll talk a bit about branding.
Okay, so that'll be in a fortnight's time. Thank you very much, David. I enjoyed that.
Yeah, me too. Cheers.
Well, I hope that you enjoyed that episode. If you're curious to find the episode on the website, go to wpbuilds.com and search for episode number 273. There's obviously a whole archive of 272 other podcast episodes there for your delectation. There's also an archive of our This Week in WordPress show, which we do every Monday, 2 p.m. UK time. It's live. Join in the commentary over there. We do enjoy it when people come and join us. But that's it for this week. If you've got any comments, let us know. Otherwise, stay safe. I hope that you have a nice week. Cheesy music fading in. Bye-bye for now.